As an intro, I'm Steve Robinson, Director of Tech for PA Media Group. I am a tech and product leader. I've worked in and around sport, media, content distribution for the last 20 years. And I'm going to share some insights both from across the industry, but also from within the lens of PA betting services, and leave you all with some takeaways to take into your businesses to consider how you can use tech to secure your distribution. So we're going to touch on three key areas today. Firstly, we're going to look at the digital landscape and look at some big trends that are happening at the moment, some of which we've touched on earlier this morning. Then we're going to zoom into PA betting services, how we at PA betting services are applying those approaches to our distribution services, maybe with some takeaways for you all too. And then finally, we'll look at those big takeaways across the trends, across these distribution mechanisms to hopefully inspire some debate and also action. So let's start with the macro view, these digital landscape trends. Now, we touched on a few of these earlier today, so it's good they are aligned. Firstly, generative AI. So in early 2023, OpenAI launched ChatGPT. In many respects, that brought generative AI to the masses. At that point, it went from a kind of an angle of computer science and went into everyone's hands. It was on everyone's device. It was the iPhone moment for AI. And with that has come loads of great opportunities, quite a few challenges as well, and we'll touch on those shortly. The evolution of bots. We used to love bots. They started as SEO crawlers. They got traffic to our sites. But they've evolved over the years as technology has enhanced, and now they prevent real potential cyber and content scraping issues. And finally, all of these combine to actually make digital rights even more complex than previously. And we'll touch on some of the reasons why very, very shortly. So first of all, Gen AI, is it a friend? Is it a foe? Let's look at some of the pros and cons. Firstly, it has driven many efficiencies. You may be using it within your businesses. It can automate processes. It can make human workflows very, very efficient. In some respects, it can remove humans from the loop. Also, it's delivered great benefit in terms of customer experience, maybe chatbots, maybe how you handle your customer services. And also, this develops even further, and with AI agent workflows, you can do even more complex workflows that would have taken many teams a lot of time previously. In terms of product enhancements, you can use AI to drive improved conversion rates. You can use it to drive retention, but also you can use it to delight customers. So whether that be AI-powered search, which now can not only look at the metadata of the content or the data you're sharing, but also actually look at the visual aspects of an image or of a video. And we'll maybe touch on some of that with Shane's session later. And finally, it's great at personalization. It can know the customer, know what they want, and give them the exact information they want when they need it. And finally, data. We now have the ability to process data in ever-increasing volumes, and this helps us have more informed decision-making, which ultimately drives better business outcomes. We know the trends, we know what the users want, and ultimately we can apply this in many different ways. Good example in the betting space is the automated calculation of odds on ever-increasingly large data sets. But with the benefits also has come a number of challenges. Firstly, content integrity. The phrase AI hallucinations started being really brought into the common phrasing in 2023. That's where AI can present something which is incorrect very confidently as fact. So it becomes very difficult to tell what is real and what is fake, which has helped spread disinformation across the internet. And ultimately, it's very difficult to tell what is real and what isn't now. Touching on IP property concerns, how have these models been trained? How have it actually been captured? Is it legal? Does it exist in a grey area? When AI produces content, whether it be text, image, video, Who owns the right to that? Is it the AI platform, or is it the content that it was trained on? And finally, underlying all of this are ethical and societal concerns around what's the environmental impact of running AI? What are the data privacy risks? When you provide it some information, what does it do with it? And ultimately, is there underlying bias into the responses that AI is producing? So I'd like to work through a few case studies now, and this is a good example of the progression of AI and how it's becoming very, very difficult to tell fact from fake. So there are a few examples here. All of them are fake, as you will note. The first one was the Pope in a Balenciaga puffer jacket. This was a viral meme. It really wasn't there to drive any kind of misinformation. It was just put out there because it was an interesting picture, and it got quite a few shares. But then you look in the middle, Donald Trump resisting arrest. This is fake, but was put out alongside real news stories to give a different angle, to generate some kind of debate. So you can see here how this technology can be used to spread misinformation. And finally, an interesting point there. This is Aitana Lopez, an AI influencer. Does not exist, was created by a marketing company, currently has over 250,000 followers and generates about 10,000 US dollars per month doing different Instagram ad and sponsorships. So it's progressing very quickly to the point where it is very difficult to determine what is fact and what is fake. So how can we approach this? How can we split what is fact and what is fake? One of the great initiatives is called C2PA, which stands for basically the Coalition of Content Provenance and Authenticity, which is a bit of a mouthful, hence C2PA. It's an industry-wide initiative with many key players in the imagery and video space adopting the standard, which allows us to track whether or not content was real. It would understand if it has been touched by a machine and ultimately help fight misinformation and deepfakes. It works with a combination of cryptography against the assets, and also will use blockchain, but it's not essential to power it to use blockchain. And ultimately, any change to that image, that video, can be tracked through the entire life cycle, because you can see the fingerprints of who has touched it, all the way from the camera, all the way through to a website that it's published on. The goal here is to build trust and transparency with digital media. So here's an example. This is from PA Media Group's news agency. This is an image taken with a new Sony camera we're currently piloting. This has a chip in it which detects that it actually, where it was taken, who took the image, and how it flows through the entire chain. And this, you can see here, is authenticated as created by PA Media with a certificate to demonstrate where that content came from. It also shows that no modifications have taken place. So it's a great way of using technology to actually track authenticity. But it works the other way as well. OpenAI, makers of ChatGPT, are also a member of C2PA. And this is an image generated by GPT-4, so quite a stylized image of a horse running. But what you can see here is OpenAI have tagged it as created by AI. So we can see here that also in the right hands, you can also say, well, actually, this was fake, and here's why. So what this shows us is that technology can be used responsibly, and we can look to use tech like C2PA to start to authenticate content. So moving on, we mentioned web scraping and bots earlier. So for the context of this talk, a bot is a non-human visitor to a website or an API. And an interesting fact, 42% of all web traffic is currently driven by bots, not humans. 2/3 of those are actually malicious. They are there to scrape data. They're there to challenge your defenses, to hack you, to potentially take you down at key points. And I think that's just a really interesting stat. And also for those that maybe run your hosting and your cloud bills, 42% of that is being spent on basically powering these bots. So it's just an interesting stat to think about. So how did we get here? So initially, we used to do everything we could to attract bots, SEO crawlers to our websites, because when Google got hold of it, it would give you a great rank, you would get more traffic, and ultimately you would get that organic growth from your sites. So it was great for owners of sites, great for the consumer as well, because they got to find exactly what they wanted. But then, as the same technology was applied at scale to other areas, such as illegal competitor scraping, it started to pull data from our sites and to be used illegally in grey areas. And we touched on some of this in the legal session this morning, which ultimately erodes that competitive advantage and also really challenges the market position. But it's not just the scraping, it's coordinated botnet attacks. So these really threaten business continuity and are very, very easy to trigger now. Somebody anywhere in the world can trigger an attack which can take down your website, and there are various ways of avoiding that, and I will share those very shortly. But these nuisance attacks can really impact revenue and also impact the reputation of our businesses. And finally, the mass collection of online content via AI crawlers. So every large language model which powers every single AI you may be using every day was trained by primarily scraped data. A lot of it was achieved in a very grey space, and ultimately this really makes us question, where did that content come from? Is every producer being rewarded for their part in training that? So it becomes a very challenging and risky area now in this ever-changing landscape. So let's look at some areas, case studies, where we can apply technology to help support, challenge some of these areas. So web application firewalls, or WAFs as they're known. So these help protect your web apps, your APIs from common exploits. They can also stop undesirable bot traffic. And you can also choose which bots you allow and which you don't, and you can dial that up and dial that down. They're a great addition to any website, and I would absolutely recommend you look at providers such as AWS, Cloudflare, and Fastly. And to give you a bit of insight into the power of this technology, one of the PA Media Group businesses sustained a DDoS attack earlier this year. It lasted about 12 hours. It drove 6 billion requests. Because we had a WAF in place, we were able to block 5.8 billion requests and actually continue to do trading. So people were still transacting on the e-commerce site whilst we were under that attack. And at peak, I think it was 250,000 requests a second, which is above what Google search takes globally. So these types of technology can really help protect your businesses from attacks to ultimately keep you serving your customers. Another interesting case study, thinking about how we potentially monetize bot traffic, is a business called Tollbit. So Tollbit were launched in 2024, so I think about March this year. And they were aimed at monetizing and licensing AI scraping. So the idea is that when an AI crawler bot comes to your site, Tollbit will say, you can't come here. If you want to come here, you will have to pay a fee. So effectively, it's adding a paywall for bots. And then you can agree licensing terms with whether it be OpenAI or Anthropic, the company behind Claude, and you will be able to be monetizing content as your content is being scraped, should you so wish to respond to it. There are many people on board with this at the moment. It's growing all the time, but I think the key thing is you can track which bots are accessing your site. You have the option to license the content to the crawlers, which means AI can be an opportunity for new revenue streams in very different ways. We are actually trialing this. Some of the graphics over there are actually from one of the trials running in PA Media Group at the moment, which is our press release and media intelligence business, MediaPoint. So we've mentioned AI, we've mentioned bots. We'll now end on the digital rights complexity. So all of those factors I previously mentioned come together to give us this picture that If your content is on the web and can be visible by a human, anyone else can scrape it. It's there, it's accessible. So to add to this, I think we mentioned it's not just digital threats, there are physical threats, so drones capturing information. People will continue to find novel ways to infringe your content, your copyright. So it's a real challenge for both creators, distributors, and rights holders. And obviously this unauthorized use has massive impact. The widespread infringement of industries like racing or like news or video or imagery, it has real impact on businesses, which ultimately means financial losses and some form of reputational damage, ultimately eroding the value and the trust that people have in your businesses. So taking the conversation we had this morning around the legal aspects of protecting IP and copyright, I'm just going to step through some examples of using either technology or process to help support this angle. So firstly, Imatag are a really interesting business. They are based out of France. Their value proposition is they can inject invisible watermarks which are indetectable to a human, but when they scrape the web, they can tell exactly where your content has been served. This allows you to very confidently say your content was rendered here, and this either is included in your distribution network or it isn't, which really helps support copyright claims because there's a clear trace of where something came from and where it was actually distributed. And the nice thing about doing it from an image perspective is people can't see. It's just there, it's hidden. Going forward, if we can trace where an image was displayed and where it was shared on the internet, how do we follow up in terms of reinforcing those rights? So Alamy is another business within PA Media Group, and it's a stock photo and video business. People spend many hours scraping content either via human or via machine and using it in different ways, which either break the license or actually were against the legal terms originally. So Alamy has a team of rights specialists which will actually chase up when infringements have been found to actually determine if we can extract more secondary rights revenue through a combination of highlighting that they may be using it in incorrect ways or the fact that actually there is a real legal threat in how they're using that content. So it's a great way of getting a secondary rights monetization stream. And if you do it in an ethical way, you can educate users of the content as well. Now, this works really well for imagery. That would require slight changes to make it work for racing data, but there's definitely a link there that we can take this approach and perhaps apply it at scale to data businesses such as racing. So I'd just like to zoom back out and look at some of the key case studies that I've been through and look at the three key areas. So protection, make sure you protect your content, your data. Make sure you wrap things like authentication, verification, and think about smart watermarking, how you can secure your distribution channels. You also need to make sure you can monitor where that content is used, where that data is used across the web. You can conduct manual checks, or you can do it at scale using mass crawlers yourself to determine where your content's used. And ultimately, when you've got the protection in place and you're monitoring, you can take swift action via enforcing. You can use legal resources where necessary, and you can also try and use that to perhaps drive novel monetization stream, different ways of monetizing that content. So those are some very broad strokes in terms of case studies. I'd now like to zoom into what we're doing at PA Betting Services and how we're applying these protect, monitor, and enforce strategies. So our product suite consists of four key areas. Area number one is a single access point to all the data and all the content that we have globally. That's exposed via an API. We'll touch on how that's secured very shortly. Notifications, this is time-critical data pushed out in real time, not pulled from an API. Works really well with race day data from a notifications point of view, but also you can get more of the rich analytics and kind of bigger editorial type data sets from the API. Widgets are a great way of combining the API into something which anyone can embed into a website. And also Advantage, the turnkey solution for wagering operators, bringing all of that together in a smart way which can drive betting. So now we're just going to take a look at some of these and how they fit together and also how they're secured. So API notifications. So number one, we have everything locked down via customer credentials. There's limited access to who can set up customers. It's fully secured and it's encrypted. Each customer has its own entitlements applied, and that allows real fine-grained access to which particular data sets they can see. So not everyone sees the same, not everyone has the rights or the license to do so. Customers are able to authenticate using their creds against the API, but this only happens initially, and then they have to do basically a time-based token reset. So even if a credential was leaked, it will only last for a period of minutes before it would have to be refreshed anyway. So this allows us to really secure that entire distribution platform. And just to talk about the entitlements, the access control. So we have really flexible ways of achieving this. We can lock it down via geography or via rights holder. We can bring these into bundles in terms of perhaps for a particular geo-region or particular types of data. Maybe you only take a basic race card, maybe you have access to wider editorial content, and also time-based restrictions. Maybe you can't see during the race, but maybe you can only see pre and post. There are different ways of allowing people access, and that allows us to give different price points. So just to think about how we could apply this. So we can apply this via location. That could be region, country, rights holder, or track. We can apply different data points. You can access different data points and unlock them for different customers. And then these can be combined in interesting ways to give us different packages. So it allows great configurability, but also it means that nobody accesses content they are not paying for and have a license for. So that's the API. Next up is the widgets, a consumer of the API. So first of all, a widget is something you can drop onto any website and it has access to live data. We make sure that we have a content delivery network in front of the widget, which gives us a great benefit to add an authorization tier. So any widget that's served on any site checks the site it's been run on, confirms if the public token is allowed to serve the widget on that site, and if it isn't, it will immediately block it. Checks the customer DB, again, using those entitlements. It releases the data when it's sure the widget is actually supposed to be running on a particular website. And ultimately, every bit of traffic is logged so we can analyze which content is being served where and if it was actually allowed to do so. And just a few examples of the widgets and how they're running on different sites. So we've got kind of cards and stats, but also moving away from racing, it's a flexible approach we're also taking to different sports using the exact same authentication entitlement approach. So that's where we are now. What's next? So firstly, we'll be looking at deploying monitoring. So looking at, can we use really smart AI embedding approaches to detect where racing data, racing content is deployed across the web? So we're looking at how taking the IMATAG type approach to text, to data, looking at those key differentiation points in the data and how we can actually track and trace where it was. And then on top of that, looking at the Alamy use case and seeing how that approach to infringement and right management can actually be deployed with racing data and scaled across the web. So I'd like to finish with a few key takeaways. So firstly, ensure you secure your distribution channels. Make sure your content is protected. Think about access controls, flexible entitlements, encryption at every level. Make sure you're able to monitor and detect infringing use. Determine methods of tracking that content and alerting where it's used in unauthorized ways. But make sure you've got a process in place to enforce when you do detect, because that also allows you to continue to protect your rights, but also to potentially unlock secondary rights revenue. And also, as Gen AI continues to develop, it will be difficult to determine not just images and video, but data, but form, but stats. So it's important to have a clear chain of origin. Where did that content come from? Make sure you've got a digital signature and an audit trail to demonstrate it came from a source and it is 100% genuine. And finally, AI crawling, AI usage is not going away. So we need to think about new ways of monetizing the content that we have. We need to look at different licensing models, different strategic partnerships with emerging platforms like Tollbit, but there are many, many more emerging at the moment. So I'd just like to leave you with those key points which may inspire thought for your businesses. And with that, I will stop and ask if there are any questions.
Is there a case study of Tollbit successfully charging a scraping company that you can talk through?
So Tollbit are working with a few US publishers at the moment. The way it typically works is you get an agreement with, for example, OpenAI. And with OpenAI, when they crawl the site, Tollbit send a record of all the crawls that OpenAI did, and then they pay the supplier. So I think there are 3, I don't think any of them are public yet, but there are 3 people in the US working with Tollbit to achieve that. But it generally works as a partnership where Tollbit analyzes the traffic and then reports back to OpenAI in this case, you have crawled our site, the fee is this, and then the fee is extracted in that way.
With AI, what implications does that have for the law and who owns the content or how the content is created and the definitions of it? I know it's
a very challenging area. The way many businesses at the moment are trying to approach this is looking for patterns of their data in the training sets or content that is returned from ChatGPT, for example. So number one, you have to prove it. And it's very difficult when what is returned is an amalgamation of the entire internet sometimes. It's very difficult to determine that. I think there is a series of open cases with some of the big stock businesses in the world, so the likes of Getty and Shutterstock, where they are tracing content that is actually contained in image generators, like Midjourney is a good example. There are many legal cases against those. Most have been resolved out of court with different settlement payments. And in fact, the reason why OpenAI at the moment doing lots of publisher deals with many big publishers, I think The Atlantic was one which was announced in the last few months, but they're working with News Corp and other big publishers. They're doing that in a preemptive way because they know the content has been scraped, and it's just a way of recognizing their contribution to the model. I think I didn't touch on it today because it went to the next level, but there are a whole generation of new distribution technologies which will be plugged into the future of large language models like ChatGPT and things like that, which will actually allow that model to talk to external sources with licensed API keys, for example, and do that in a legitimate way. For those that want to read up on it, it's called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. And basically, when you ask ChatGPT something, it says, I don't know that, I'll go somewhere else and do it. That request will be licensed and will be authenticated. But again, that's still emerging at the moment.
It might be useful just from a community standpoint to have a central register of known leakage.
Yeah.
Therefore, we could be blocking that because it's a cost to us as an operator.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. Yeah, there are many public nuisance scraper sites, and also you can also, some of the, let's say, ethical bots, like OpenAI have moved into that space. They will announce who they are, so you can choose to block them. So with your robots.txt, you can say, actually, no, don't crawl me. But I think having a shared set in the sports, racing, betting area would be a great way of doing it. And if it were publicly hosted, it can then be integrated into different platforms. So yeah, great call.
I was just wondering about PA Media's sort of, maybe outside the betting service as well,
Yeah.
Position on AI created content. Because obviously we all know there's a lot of potential for efficiencies and improved content through AI. But there's also, I know a lot of media groups saying we're not going to use AI.
Yeah.
So I was wondering how you see that fitting with your role as technology officer.
So it's a great question. Before we started any level of AI adoption, the first thing was looking at policies. Where should it be used? Where shouldn't it be used? And also looking at the news agency business that we have, PA Media. What would be right, given that we are fast, we are fair, we are accurate, we are known for our neutrality and our integrity. So as a rule, we do not use any generative text on our outputs that hasn't been reviewed by a human. We've got very robust editorial standards around that. We've made sure we've drawn that line because we cannot risk our integrity. There are areas where automation, such as maybe reviewing content as it flows through to maybe pull out categories or suggest how this could be used or should be used, there are areas where they can be used in quite a safe way, but anything which is generative in terms of content out is a no-no in terms of making sure that it's 100% human. And the other side of it is we are doubling down on making sure content is authentic, which is why we're really behind C2PA, so we can demonstrate that our images are 100% captured by a neutral PA Media journalist. And obviously the industry is gradually rolling that out as well. So I think there's also the element of demonstrating authenticity, but also ensuring we don't use generative AI in areas where it would degrade our integrity, because it's high risk.
I can take it back to ImaTag for a second. And obviously, you're referring to something that I can invisibly identify where content has actually been delivered.
Yeah.
That's on an individual by individual basis. Have you an experience of dealing with them yourselves? What does the commercial model look like? Just so if you can maybe just widen out that whole ImaTag piece.
So with ImaTag, and again, there are many others who work in this space, just to point that out. So what ImaTag do in terms of business model is when you create the digital watermark, the invisible watermark, there is a cost every time you do that. So if you have a collection of millions of images, there's obviously a sizable cost there. Then when you spread that content out via your content delivery networks on the internet, they will do monitoring against it. So they're looking at crawl data, they're scraping the web themselves to determine where that content's run. And that watermark would actually demonstrate where it came from, but it can also be configured to say which license it was done on if you run multiple licenses. So you're effectively paying for the tagging, you're also paying for the monitoring, and then out of that you will get a record of where content has been published in a machine-readable form, and that's when you can work with legal partners to look at infringing content around that and drive that revenue stream. So again, what ImaTag do is the tech to do the invisible watermarking and the monitoring. They don't focus on the secondary rights and infringements piece. And I think just to expand this out as well, so in some respects, watermarking images or videos is quite easy because there's lots of pixels, there's lots of data, and you can easily manipulate it. It's actually more difficult doing that with text. So the challenge is looking for those unique patterns and trying to tokenize it, and we're currently trying to determine the best way forward for that. So whilst the concept works great for images, it's still a little work in progress in terms of text and data.